Welcome to Wonder Fungi.
It's great to be here. I'm really excited to get into this one because some of this new research really changes the game in how we should be thinking about the whole therapeutic process.
Absolutely. Today, we are digging into what is, I think, the most common question out there. The one that, every single person asks right after a big experience.
Oh, yeah. The stopwatch question.
Exactly. The stopwatch question, the effects wear off, you're sitting there with all this insight, and the first thing that pops in your head is, okay, so what do I do now?
And more to the point, when can I go back in?
Right. And we all know the rule of thumb, the sort of folk wisdom that's, actually rooted in real biology. If you've had a high dose of psilocybin or LSD, you have to wait.
You have to. The usual advice is 2 weeks.
2 weeks, right. And that's not just a suggestion, it's a hard stop. It's a physiological wall you hit.
The body is basically enforcing a mandatory timeout.
So, if we know that, if we accept that the receptors, the very things that make the trip happen, need to reset, what are we supposed to be doing with that time? That precious time between the journeys. If the door is literally bolted shut by biology for a week or two, what is the real work?
That is the mission for this deep dive. We're talking about integration. And we need to move past this sort of fluffy idea of what that means.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a buzzword.
It has. So let's define it, using the science. Integration is the critical, active process of making sense of the lessons from that experience, synthesizing the insights, and then, and this is the key part, consciously applying them to your normal, sober, day-to-day life.
It's the bridge. The bridge from the profound back to the practical. And what's so cool about the research we're looking at is that it doesn't just, tell us why we have to pause.
No, it does more.
It gives us this incredible scientific reason for why that window of time, that pause, isn't just a cool-down period. It's actually the most fertile ground for real, lasting change.
That's the paradox, isn't it? And it's one we really have to unpack. I mean, let's just start with the effects themselves. You look at the clinical trial data. It's just stunning.
We're talking about rapid, persistent benefits from psilocybin, LSD, for things that are notoriously difficult to treat.
Exactly. This isn't just, taking a pill to feel a little better for a few hours. That's not what this is.
Well,
we have solid data showing durable, lasting relief for major depressive disorder, MDD, treatment-resistant depression, even things like alcohol use disorder.
And the anxiety studies are maybe the most famous ones.
Right. The trials for anxiety in people with life-threatening illnesses. I mean, in those studies, you had something like 77% of participants showing durable relief. And that's measured a year after the treatment.
A whole year from maybe 1 or 2 sessions.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. It really drives home that the trip itself, the acute part, is so short.
It's 4, maybe 8 hours.
But the benefit lasts for months, maybe years. So if the cause is brief, but the effect is long, what does that tell you? Where is the real mechanism?
It tells you the psychedelic experience is the catalyst. It's not the cure itself. The trip is transient. The visuals, the insights, that peak, it's all short-lived. But the benefits that drop in symptoms can last for 3, 6, 12 months or more.
So the peak vanishes, but the benefit stays.
Which strongly suggests the real engine for change isn't the trip, but the chain reaction it kicks off in the brain right after. It opens what we're calling a critical neuroplasticity window.
So the drug just pries the window open, but the window itself stays open long after the drug is gone. I love that because it completely flips the focus.
How so?
Well, everyone focuses on the quality of the trip. Did I have a good trip? But the science seems to be saying, no, focus on the quality of the week after the trip.
Precisely. And to really take advantage of that window, we have to understand why it opens and, just as important, why the drug itself forces you to take a break, why that door has to lock for a bit.
Okay, let's do that. Let's get into the mechanics of that lock on the door.
Yeah.
Tolerance. Why does the brain put up this hard stop? It all starts with one specific receptor, right?
It all starts and ends with the 5-HT2A receptor, the serotonin 2A receptor. That's the primary target for all the classic psychedelics. Psilocybin, LSD, they bind to it, they activate it.
They're agonists.
They're agonists, exactly. And that activation is what creates the hallucinogenic effects and, we now know, the therapeutic effects too.
And the brain's immediate reaction to that much activation is tolerance. The term you see is tachyphylaxis, right?
Mm-hmm.
For this super fast kind of tolerance.
That's the one. The brain is an adaptive system, always trying to find balance or homeostasis. So when you flood it with something that keeps hitting the 5-HT2A receptor, the brain's response is, whoa, okay, this is too much. We need to turn down the volume. And it does that by building tolerance to the mental effects incredibly quickly.
How quickly? Are we talking a few days?
Not even. In the human studies with LSD, a substantial mental tolerance shows up just 24 hours after the first dose.
24 hours?
Yeah. You could take the exact same amount the next day, and the experience would be significantly weaker. Noticeably so.
Wow. And I'm guessing it doesn't just stop there. It probably gets stronger.
It keeps building. It hits its absolute maximum by about the fourth day in a row. And once you're there, at that peak tolerance, it's like a brick wall. The older studies showed you can't get past it even if you quadruple the original dose.
Really? A 400% increase in dose, and you still get nothing.
Or, very little. The brain has just shut down that pathway. You absolutely cannot brute force your way through it.
That's a powerful physiological block.
It is. And here's the other key thing for anyone thinking they can just switch substances.
Ah, right, the cross-tolerance.
Exactly. The tolerance you build to LSD also applies to psilocybin and mescaline. It generalizes across the whole class of classic psychedelics.
So taking LSD on Monday means that a big dose of mushrooms on Tuesday is going to be a dud.
A significant dud, yes, because they all use the same primary pathway. The brain doesn't just lock the one door you came through, it locks the whole wing of the building that runs on the 5-HT2A system. You can't just sneak in through another door.
Okay, so that brings us to the reset time. We hear 2 weeks, but what does the molecular biology say? How long until that lock comes off?
Well, the good news is the system is built to reset pretty fast. The data confirms that this kind of tolerance is completely reversed after about 5 days of total abstinence.
5 days.
By day 5, the system is pretty much back to normal, so that 5 to 7 day window really confirms why you need that break. And it lines up almost perfectly with how they space out sessions in the clinical trials.
Okay, but hold on. If it's fully reset by 5 days, why does everyone say 2 weeks? Is that just, an old idea, or is there something else going on?
That is a fantastic question. And it gets to the heart of the difference between, let's say, pure biology and smart integration. At 5 days, yes, the receptor is biologically ready to go again.
The hardware is reset.
The hardware is reset. But the 2-week recommendation is about more than that. It's about psychological safety, giving yourself time to process, and critically, it's about not wasting that neuroplasticity window. As we're about to see, that window for learning and change stays open for much longer than 5 days. If you jump back in too soon, you're essentially overwriting the lesson from the last experience before you've had a chance to really encode it.
So the body might be ready at day 5, but the real work needs the full 2 weeks. That makes a lot of sense.
It gives you time to do the work.
Okay, let's look at the hard evidence for this, the actual physical changes. This is where that pig study you mentioned comes in. It's kind of amazing because it gives us a real-time snapshot of the receptors shutting down and then coming back online.
Yeah, this large animal study was one of the first to give us a direct look. They gave pigs a single dose of psilocybin and then measured the receptor density in their brains at 2 different times.
When was that?
1 day after and then 7 days after.
And what did they see with the 5-HT2A receptor, the main target?
Well, the results were a perfect confirmation of tolerance. 1 day after the injection, there was a big, significant drop in the density of 5-HT2A receptors.
That's the downregulation. The brain is literally pulling the targets offline.
Exactly. And it happened most in the brain regions that are really important for emotion, like the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex.
How big was the drop?
It was substantial. The reduction ranged anywhere from, 15 to 50%, depending on the specific region. Basically, a huge chunk of the receptors were just less available. The brain was saying, okay, we've had enough of that signal for now.
The door is locked. The timeout has begun.
Right. But then when they looked again at the 7-day mark, right in that sweet spot where we know tolerance is gone, the receptor density was completely back to baseline.
So a full reset.
A full reset. No statistical difference from the control group. The system was back online and the biological tolerance period was officially over. So that really closes the book on the first part of the story. Pause is real, it's mandatory, and it's temporary.
Okay, so the system that creates the trip is back to normal in about a week. But if that were the whole story, those long-term benefits we talked about, the antidepressant effects, they just wouldn't make sense.
Exactly.
If the trip mechanism is so temporary, why are the benefits so durable? And this is where we get to the really exciting part, the neuroplasticity window. Because while the 5-HT2A receptor was taking a break, something else in the brain was doing the exact opposite.
That is the crucial insight. This is what makes integration so important. Unlike that 5-HT2A receptor, which went down, another key protein went up. And it stayed up.
Okay, what is it?
It's called SV2A, synaptic vesicle protein 2A.
SV2A. That's a mouthful. Can you break that down for us? If 5-HT2A is the antenna picking up the signal, what's SV2A doing?
SV2A is basically a marker for new construction. It's a protein that tells us where new connections between neurons are being formed. It's directly tied to synaptogenesis, the literal physical creation of new pathways in the brain.
So it's like a foreman on a construction site. If you see a lot of SV2A, you know that new roads and bridges are being built in the brain's communication network.
That's a perfect analogy, and here's why that matters so much. Low synaptic density, so fewer connections, is consistently linked to severe depression. In a depressed brain, the networks get really rigid and stuck. Synaptogenesis is the process of breaking out of those ruts and building new, healthier routes.
This has to be the biological foundation for those lasting benefits. The drug comes in and basically kickstarts a massive infrastructure project.
Yes, and the findings from that same pig study are what completely change our perspective on that post-journey time. Just one day after the psilocybin dose, the pigs already had about 4.4% more SV2A in the hippocampus. The remodeling starts right away.
That's the immediate afterglow, in biological terms. But the key question is durability. Does that construction crew stick around?
It does, and this is the data point that defines the neuroplasticity window. 7 days later, remember, the trip is long over, the 5-HT2A receptors are just getting back to normal, the SV2A density was still significantly higher.
How much higher?
It was up 9.24% in the hippocampus, which is huge for memory and motion, and up 6.1% in the prefrontal cortex, which handles our executive function. This is physical proof of ongoing construction.
Wow, so the brain's hardware is sending two completely different signals at the same time. And that's the key.
What do you mean?
The part that caused the trip, the 5-HT2A system, is offline, it's resting. But the part responsible for building new connections, the SV2A system, is running at full speed.
Exactly. The brain is primed for remodeling right at the moment the noise of the experience has died down.
That's the biological mandate for integration. That persistent increase in synaptic markers is the reason the time after the journey is the most critical period to form new habits. The brain is literally ready to learn.
If you don't use that window, it's like you've hired this amazing construction crew, the elevated SV2A, but you haven't given them a blueprint. They're ready to build, but they might just rebuild the same old broken down structures.
The brain is plastic. It's going to learn something. The job of integration is to make sure it learns the right things.
Precisely.
Let's go even deeper now. It's not just about building materials like SV2A. The brain is actually rewriting the genetic code, the blueprints themselves, to prepare for all this new learning.
Right. This is where we look at gene expression. There are studies that took human cortical neurons, basically brain cells in a dish, and exposed them to a single dose of psilocin.
The active metabolite.
The active metabolite. And they saw these rapid but also long-lasting changes in which genes were being turned on and off.
What's the timeline on that? When do the new blueprints get printed out?
It's a two-stage process almost. The first big wave happens within 24 hours. You see genes related to physical growth, like axonal growth and synaptic remodeling, turn on. That's the urgent order to start building.
In a second stage.
That comes a little later. At day 3, you see a big increase in genes related to synaptic organization, plasticity, and crucially, learning and memory.
So the physical growth starts first, and then a couple of days later, the genes for learning and memory kick in to make sure the new structures get used and remembered.
Exactly right. There's a particular family of genes that gets a huge boost called immediate early genes, or IEGs. These are the genome's first responders.
What are some of their names?
You see ones like EGR1, ARC, and FOSB get upregulated. And these IEGs are absolutely essential for learning and memory. They are the molecular switch that turns a temporary experience into a permanent change in the brain's wiring.
So the psychedelic experience is essentially pressing the record button on a biological level. It's getting the learning machinery all fired up to capture whatever comes next.
That is the perfect way to put it. It creates a state of enhanced biological receptivity. And we know for sure it's the psychedelic action causing this. Because when they did the same experiment, but also added ketanserin, which is a 5-HT2A blocker, all those genetic changes disappeared.
That's the smoking gun. It proves that the learning and memory genes are being turned on by the 5-HT2A activation. The brain isn't just physically open to change because of SV2A, it is genetically programmed to learn.
The science is telling us that for a period of days to weeks, your brain becomes this incredibly active sponge. It's structurally and genetically ready to soak up new behaviors, new perspectives, new information.
Which means if you've been stuck in the same rigid patterns for years, this window is a biological opportunity to finally lay down some new tracks.
That's it. It's a unique period of malleability.
Okay, so this brings us to the most important part of this whole deep dive. We've established the biological urgency. The brain is primed. So what do we do? How do we actually leverage this window?
We have to think about it from a couple of angles. Psychologically, the brain is in a state of what you could call heightened suggestibility.
So our normal defenses, the stories we tell ourselves about why we can't change, those are weaker.
They're softened, the mind is more open to new narratives, and what's interesting is that this openness is correlated with high conscientiousness. So it's not just a chaotic state, it's a state of intentional receptivity.
Which means any therapy, any new story you're trying to tell yourself is going to be amplified during that period.
Exactly. This connects right back to those clinical trials showing anxiety reduction a year later. It suggests the new, healthier narrative that was worked on during therapy took root so deeply because the brain was biologically primed to accept it.
The goal isn't just to remember the insight from the trip. It's to use the plasticity to encode the new behavior that insight demands.
That's the leverage point.
Okay, let's get into the actionable steps. What's the very first thing you should do when the experience is over? You said journaling and doing it immediately. Why the rush?
The rush is because of those immediate early genes we just talked about, EGR1, ARC. They spike very quickly, and they are what help turn a fleeting thought into a physical, structural change.
So writing it down helps lock it in.
The act of writing, of processing, of externalizing those insights, it helps solidify the new neural pathways that the IEGs are trying to build. If you wait 3 or 4 days to write about it, you've missed the peak of that genetic recording machinery.
And the advice isn't just doodle in a notebook. It should be structured, right? Like, what was the core insight? What old pattern does it relate to? And what is the new action I'm going to take?
Exactly. You're turning a memory into a blueprint. And the physical act of writing itself reinforces it. You don't have to be a poet. Just get the core of it down on paper while the biological record button is still pressed.
Okay, that's the immediate aftermath, taking advantage of the IEG spike. What about the next few days? How do we use that elevated SV2A, that sustained construction phase?
That's when consistent practice really pays off. Things like meditation and mindfulness are perfect tools for this period.
How so?
Well, let's say your insight was about how you react to stress with anger, and you realized it's an old protective pattern. Mindfulness practice gives you the chance to observe that impulse arise and not act on it.
So you're exercising the new neural pathways. You're forcing the brain to use the new roads instead of the old, worn-out highway.
You are literally helping to direct the construction. You're telling that SV2A crew, hey, reinforce this path to calmness, not the old one to reactivity. The brain is soft clay during this time, and these practices help you mold it intentionally.
It turns it from something passive into active brain sculpting. And what about talking it through with someone?
Absolutely vital. Discussing the experience with a therapist, or at least a very experienced guide, leverages that heightened suggestibility in a safe way. They can help you make sense of the insights.
Especially the really challenging ones.
Especially those. A good guide can help you connect a, mystical, abstract insight to a concrete daily behavior. They help make sure you don't misinterpret something or adopt a new negative story instead of a positive one.
And that brings us to the final step, which is probably the hardest but also the most important, making real-world concrete changes.
This is where the rubber meets the road. This is the ultimate application. Since the brain is biologically primed to form new habits, this is the absolute best time to actually change your behavior.
You give us a concrete example?
Sure. Let's say your insight was that you avoid difficult conversations at work and it's making you miserable. The integration isn't just journaling about that. It's actually scheduling that conversation with your boss within the next few days.
You have to act on it.
You have to act. When the brain sees a new insight followed immediately by a new, positive, real-world action, that synaptogenesis, that new pathway, gets reinforced so much more strongly. You're telling the construction crew, build the highway right here, I'm using it now.
If you don't, the machinery just goes back to its old default settings.
It will eventually, yes. The window is temporary, you have to capitalize on it. These new behaviors, new thought patterns, when you practice them during this period, they get physically embedded into the brain's architecture.
This totally reframes the whole process. Let's try to sum it all up then. The transient part versus the opportunity.
Okay, so the reason we have to pause is because the 5-HT2A receptors get downregulated. They take a break, that's the transient part, and it resets in about a week.
The trip mechanism turns off. But the real opportunity is in what persists, what stays active. That's the neuroplasticity window.
Right. It's defined by the elevated SV2A, that marker for new connections, which stays high, signaling ongoing construction. And it's driven by that upregulation of learning and memory genes. It creates this period of enhanced flexibility that lasts long after the trip is a memory.
So the science really solves that paradox we started with. The trip is just the spark.
It's the spark that starts a multi-day construction project in your brain. And that post-journey period is the active construction phase. Understanding that, really understanding that biological reality should completely shift your focus.
It shifts it from chasing the next peak experience
To consolidating and strengthening the insights from the last one. It reframes where the real power is.
It really does. Which I think leads to the only possible conclusion from all this science.
I think so. It's that the medicine isn't the trip. The medicine is what you do after the trip.
The real work happens between the journeys. Thanks for listening, and please like and subscribe to Wonder Fungi.